Hello, I'm Chris Knowles. I'm a senior engine developer at Jagex. We're most well known for making RuneScape, which is a game we launched way back in 2001. And we've updated it a lot since then. So in fact, we have the Guinness World Record for the most prolifically updated MMORPG video game. So the last time they came and assessed us back in 2017, we'd updated RuneScape 1,014 times. And in a given week, we expect to do 2 updates, one to RuneScape itself, and one to old school RuneScape, which is a sort of a retro version we also run. And so when it comes to updating live games, we quite possibly have more experience than anybody else. And I've been doing this for 11 years, so I've come here today to talk to you about how to do this kind of thing, and also how not to do it. So to set the scene, we are going to kick off, we're going to see some live maintenance going badly wrong.
Plug in the blue socket.
Is that it? Am I okay now?
Yeah.
Shouldn't this plug into something?
Oh yeah, that joins up with the white cable.
A white cable?
Yep. Or is it the yellow cable?
There you go. So that was Red Dwarf. That was some classic 80s BBC comedy. And that's a great example of how not to do it. So Lister, the guy with the Scouse accent, he didn't know what he was doing. He was unprepared, and he was being given bad info by Holly. Now, my experience is mostly in software engineering, but most of what I'm going to say is going to be relevant to most disciplines. So what I'm going to say about testing and review and infrastructure is going to affect designers and level architects. And even if you're an artist, what you do is going to be affected by polygon budgets, by resolutions and that kind of thing. And if there's some mistake there and that isn't seen before you go live, somebody may have to come to you and ask you to do a lot of late nights to sort that out. So you guys are you're students, but you may have already done some game stuff. I don't know. Maybe you've put out mods. Maybe you've done full games. I've no idea. But I want you all to imagine you're ahead a few years. You finished your studies. You're out in the world of work, and maybe you've joined some existing outfit and they've got some new game or some new update that they're kind of ready to do, or you've started something new. Maybe you're an indie back in your parents' garage or something. But you've got something, and it works, and it's fun, and it's polished, and it looks great, and the audio is on point, and you're ready to drop the hammer and launch this thing. What are your players going to see when you do? I mean, hopefully they're not going to see this. That'd be awkward. Or indeed this. And you'd be going some to do it these days, but you really don't want them to see this. And more subtly, you don't want to introduce some sort of game-breaking bug where everything seems fine, but then it turns out that players get stuck, they can't progress, or they start losing their rare items or something like that. And the absolute nightmare scenario for something like RuneScape is having to do a rollback, where the game is so horrendously broken that not only do we need to shut the game down and prevent people from playing something, we need to actually go back and remove their progress to before some sort of bug happened, which means that that's going to frustrate anybody who has got some sort of rare drop in the meantime, or there's been they've sort of defeated a boss for the first time or something like that. So anytime you update a live game, there is an opportunity for something like this to happen. But unfortunately, it's not just updating a live game that can break things. Not updating your game can also cause problems. So as an example, back in 2013, Microsoft forgot to renew an SSL certificate, and all of the HTTPS traffic for Azure, which is their cloud service that cost them billions to develop, it all stopped working. No secure traffic, no HTTPS, which was quite awkward. And if you're not updating SSL certificates in your game, then maybe that means that no one can log into your game, or they can't buy anything on your shop or something like that. Maybe it just means that your game doesn't work on the latest version of Windows or iOS or Android or whatever. If you're really not updating your game for a long time on the mobile platforms, you may even get yanked from the store, that kind of thing. And this kind of thing costs you customers, it costs you money, it's not good. And therefore, you need to do everything you can to reduce the risk when you do an update. So you need to make the process as easy as possible. You don't want anything that's complicated and arcane with too many weird steps. You don't want it to be easy to miss things. You don't want to be resistant to doing an update because it's difficult or it's dangerous. And really, you want your process to be as sensibly automated as you can be. I'll come back to that later, but really, the more automated, the better, up to a point. But really, the best way to avoid getting burned by playing with live electricity is to not do it in the first place, by which I mean you want to deal with all the change and all the uncertainty before you get anywhere near pushing anything to your live environment. So you want to have absolute confidence that you know how your game will behave when it goes live. You want to find all the issues before you launch. Now, you're never going to find every bug in your game. There'll always be one player who somehow connects a GameCube controller to their PC and turns the monitor upside down, and now every time they start your game up, their PC orders 30 kilos of rubber bands from Amazon or something. Right? You're never going to find everything, but you do need to find all the stuff is really going to ruin someone's day. And mostly what this comes down to is testing. Now, testing will mean different things to different people, and hopefully if you guys do join some big existing company, they've already thought about this and they're getting this right. Your scope to change how they do things is probably going to be quite limited at first. But if you're joining something small or you're doing something new, then you've got a real opportunity to produce positive change in the way things are done. So we'll start with unit tests, so breaking down small parts of your code, making sure they do exactly what you think they do. And the real value of these is then when you come back 6 months later and you change that bit of code and you forget to cope with some sort of edge case and the test fails and says, oh no, you've broken this thing, you need to deal with that. And that's much better than someone in QA a week later saying, oh, this thing seems to have got broken. You go back through all the things you've done in the last week and work out what it might have been. Or of course, even worse, it's a subtle bug, it doesn't get spotted until it's out in the wild, and then you've got players reporting that there is some strange issue and you have to go and work out what it was you did. Now that's pretty easy to do on your source code because there are lots of frameworks that will help you test that. It might be a little bit more difficult if you're doing content, but it can be done. So all the content in RuneScape runs on a custom scripting language called RuneScript, which we wrote. It's compiled by an in-house tool that gets run on our script running framework at runtime. And a guy called John Pace, give him a follow on Twitter, he wrote a unit testing framework for RuneScript, which is great because it means that when we change that stuff, we can have confidence we're not breaking something. So if we've got a very sensitive system, say the bank, so stashing all the items you're not carrying with your character at the moment, putting things in, getting things out has got to be robust. We don't want items to be duplicating items. And we want to change that code with confidence that you haven't made it break in some way. And you can even, if you want to, you could unit test your graphic shaders. At some point, testing a shader involves getting an artist, putting them in front of the screen and saying, is that what you wanted? But they just do maths, and you can test that maths. You can have confidence that your shader isn't going to produce some sort of weird glitch in some odd situation. Now, once things have been tested in that way, you want to do some sort of review, where people look at your code and other developers are saying, well, is this the right approach? Is it well structured? Is there anything that looks wrong with it? Does it look like it will perform well under load? One thing that's easy to miss when you're doing this is all the code that should be here actually here? If you've changed this system over here, someone else might say, well, hang on, that's going to have an impact over here, and we need to cope with those changes over here and do this as well. And code review is really useful both it's a learning experience for the people doing the review, seeing what other people are doing in the code base, keeping abreast of all the changes, seeing how other people roll, but also, of course, it's valuable for the person receiving the feedback and how they can do things better. And code review should never just be about seniors reviewing juniors' code. Right? Nobody's code is above being improved. Everybody's code should be reviewed. And if you go into some big scary company, there's a little junior guy or girl, and you're looking at a code review and something seems wrong, then say so. Because it may well be you genuinely have spotted a problem that nobody else has. Right? I've been doing this 11 years. I've had the experience with a guy fresh out of university in our team saying, that's not how you use this API, here's the docs, and I've gone and fixed it. Or it might be that something that looks a bit odd is being done for some particular reason, maybe something to do with performance, and no one expects you to understand the code base on day one. Of course we don't. So that's an opportunity for someone to come and sit down with you and kind of explain what's going on, and you've learned something. Once you've tested all the little bits, you can sort of start testing sort of bigger systems. Does your save game system actually work? Can you get into the game, go somewhere, save it, shut down, load up, and actually genuinely be exactly where you were before? Does it work? If you plug your payment system into the sandbox of your payment provider, can you actually go through the entire flow and buy an item? And this is the point at which your QA team can probably start getting involved there on sort of things you can actually build and deploy. I'm not going to say too much about QA, it's not my discipline, but do be lovely to those people. They have the kind of job where they basically, people ignore them while everything's fine, but one bug gets through and they cop a lot of flack. So be lovely to them. They have a job which is often a bit tedious, but our games would be really ropey without those guys doing what it is they do. Once you've tested, those things, you can start looking at builds of, well, I say your whole game so far. Again, QA will help you with that. And you can also start doing play testing. It'd be great to find out if it's fun or not before you launch it. Get people off the street, ask them what they think. But even at this stage, I would encourage you to keep going with the automation. You don't just automate unit tests and everything else. Unit test this stuff. So the guys at Crow Team who made the Talos principle, they made a bot that they called Bot, which could play the entire game. It's a puzzle game. And it wasn't a very clever bot. They had to show it how to do the puzzle. So it was, go here, pick this box up, put it on this button, grab this connector, bounce a laser from here to here, and so on. But it could play through the game very quickly. And it meant that if ever they changed a level, if they moved some scenery, if they made a wall taller or something, the bot would very quickly tell them if they'd made a level impossible. And they could get that feedback very quickly, rather than someone doing a full playtest once a week and sort of telling people where things had gone wrong. And they reckon that over the course of developing the game, the bot did 15,000 hours of playtesting, which is massively valuable to have very quickly and completely automated. You can also automate other kinds of testing, like performance. So if you've got a suite of devices that every time you do a build, run through some sort of pre-programmed demo, you can check the performance over time, and if you do an update and suddenly the frame rate tanks, you know exactly when it was it happened, you can work out what the change was that did it, and you can fix it. And if you're developing for console and you've got an art team who are trying to squeeze every drop of performance they can while not going below 30 FPS or whatever, then this kind of system can help them make sure they're riding that line. If you're building for PC, then having a compatibility suite with different operating systems and graphics cards and CPUs and so on that does tests every time you do a build can help you give you confidence that you haven't just broken the game for people on this particular card or whatever it is. Cool. Now this might sound quite a long way from doing live updates, but let me show you an example of what happens when the process doesn't quite catch everything. So we did have to do the dreaded rollback this year for old school RuneScape. So we had a problem with one of these, because it should have been one of these. Yeah, and exactly what the details of the update were weren't important. It's to do with how we handle the items you were carrying when you died in the game. And some change was made. The feature was tested. It was reviewed. It was tested. It worked absolutely fine. But a bit nearer to the release, the developer who worked on it was asked, well, could you restructure the code a bit and make it a bit neater? And that happened. Now, there's no unit testing framework for old school RuneScape. We haven't got that yet from RuneScape 3, which that's exactly the kind of issue that probably would have been spotted by a unit test if you've got a well-written set of tests. But the code, and it was retested, but it just happened to be that the exact sort of scenario where this bug triggered didn't happen to come up when anybody tested it. And so within an hour of us launching, we realized that under a certain setup, which wasn't particularly uncommon, when you died, you would receive this, which is 2 billion gold pieces, which, if you were to camp Zulra, which is a very a boss with great drops, and you camped it 8 hours a day, it would take you about 4 months to get that. So this was a big problem. It was happening all over the place. Huge amounts of gold game, far too many accounts for us to deal with individually or anything like that. And so we had no choice but to shut the game down. And the old school guys went and worked out and found their rogue inequality. And those of us in the engine team had to do the rollback process. So we had to get in touch with the systems administrators. They had to find we have sort of snapshots of backups. They had to find the snapshot from just before we did the update, get the right files for us, get them into the live system. We then swapped them in, started the servers up. We started up one game world just in a sort of a staff-only mode. Went in, we had a look, the QA team had a look, satisfied ourselves that everything did seem fine, and then we opened the floodgates again. And that was about 6 hours of downtime, really. It was the rest of the day plus a bit more. And that was the first rollback we'd had to do since 2010. These really are rare, they're not great. Now this was no one person's fault. It's just the kind of thing that you learn from. You pick yourself up, you carry on, you make sure you one more thing you need to add to a test plan next time. But these things do happen, and the processes will mitigate this, but very occasionally it's not quite enough. So, not only do you need to test, the small parts of your code, the individual bits of your code, are they doing the right mathematical things, and so on. One other thing you also need to check is, do you know how your game is actually going to behave when it goes out into the real world? Because the real world is not the same as the office, turns out. So, for example, is your game going to cope under load? So, is it going to scale? If your game is supposed to support 2,000 players per server, well, does it? If you're making a 64-player FPS, you can probably test that just for people in the office, and that's fine. If you want 2,000 people, you have to go and find them from somewhere. And that's why large-scale games often have what they call sort of a technical beta, just getting people and throwing them at the servers and making sure that everything stands up under the load. But you don't only need to test the infrastructure. Does the hardware work? Does the CPU keep up? You also need to ask, well, does your gameplay scale? Does the design work with the right number of people? I mean, does anybody remember standing in this queue? Anybody? Stick your hand up. Yeah, a few people. So this was the Division on launch day. As part of the opening game process, you had to go and put some details into a laptop. The problem being that there was only one laptop and only one person could use it at once. And so on launch day, people were literally forming an orderly queue to get into the game. Right? It's not good. Now, of course, this worked fine in testing. Every QA tester went through an empty lobby by themselves, thought it worked absolutely fine. But it needed to be tested under sort of real-world conditions to see whether or not it was going to stand up. Other things to consider are things like ping. So the game works fine in the office, but once you've launched the game and some guy in Peru is playing and he's talking to a data center in Miami, and that's talking to a back-end system in London, does the delay in getting the data back and the game unplayable? What exactly does your testing environment look like? It's ideal if your staging environment, where you do your final testing, looks as much like the live environment as you can get it. Because you don't want there to be any final unknowns, any final hurdles, any things that are different when you finally put the game live. So does your testing environment have the same operating system on the test machines? Do you have the same firewall setup and the same firewall rules so you can be sure that it works in the office? Will the servers actually talk to each other once the game is live? This tweak puts it pretty well. You do have a testing environment. Hopefully you have somewhere else to run your live game. The other question you can think about is redundancy. So if one power supply in one server fails and that server goes down, does your game carry on, or does the entire thing fall over? Now, there may be one or two critical systems where you just need to make sure this server is always available, but hopefully you can design most of your game so that the loss of one machine means that other things pick up the slack and people can carry on. So let's imagine you've done all this, you've tested everything, it's been reviewed, QA have had a look at it, playtesters think it's fun, it works well in your staging environment, you have confidence it's going to work when you put it live. How do you do the actual launching bit? How do you get it live without setting everything on fire? Well, the moment of truth. So, before you poke your live environment, what are you going to do if it goes wrong? What is your fallback plan? And how are you going to spot and decide, actually, this isn't working, we need to do something else? Now, there are a couple of things you can do if something does go wrong. So I've said rollbacks are bad. They're bad in terms of the actual game itself and player saves, but in terms of the software, they can work very well. So if you've shut down the servers, pushed out a new version, and they just won't start, so they keep crashing on startup, can you go and find the last version that worked, redeploy it to live, start the servers up again, and get everyone else back into the game while you work out what just happened? Or is everyone going to have to sit offline while you do the debugging? Now, in terms of game content, we can't really remove content from RuneScape because as soon as we put some new content out and people have logged in, there are variables in their save games tracking the new content and how they've interacted with it. And if we take the content out, then their save games are invalid. But what we can do is what we call a hotfix. So we can upload new versions of the scripts to the game servers and they will reload them on the fly without having to shut everything down and bring everything back up again. So we can't do a rollback, but we can react to bugs much more quickly. But of course, it's important not to go, oh, it's broken, quick, hotfix, 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 and then do something wrong. It's broken for now, that's fine, that's life. Take your time, go through all the steps, make a change, get it reviewed, get it tested, and put it live. Now, you want your launches to be as smooth as possible. And as I said before, the operating phrase is sensible automation. So the more automated your launch process is, the less there is you can forget, which is good, right? Fewer opportunities for human screw-ups. But you don't want to automate it too much. So you probably could have one enormous red button in the office, and you hit that, and it takes the latest build, it pushes it to your deployment staging server, that then goes and sends it to all of your live data centers around the world, tells those servers to shut down and start up with a new version, and in the meantime it goes to Steam and tells it to put the latest version of the client live. Which is great, except you might end up in a pickle if one of those stages doesn't quite work, but the whole process carries on. What are you going to do if one of the data centers didn't get the update? What are you going to do if you shut the servers down, put the new version of the game on and started it up again, but the new version of the client isn't available and none of your players can talk to the servers because their clients don't know what it's talking about. So you want to have enough pauses in your automated deployment system for you to go and check that everything is how you think it is, things do seem to have worked, so that you can be sure that the next stage is going to work. You know, I said that when we did a rollback, we could start one world up so that only staff could get onto it and check everything there. It did seem to be fine before we let everybody back in. That's an important stage to be able to have if you need it. When you're doing your update, you need to be documented. You need to know what it is you're going to do. You need to know all the steps. And this needs to be up to date. It's no good if it's old. So that you're sure at every stage you're doing the right thing. You've covered all the bases. You want a plan you can follow. And you need to understand what you're doing at each step. So, you know, I've been doing this job 11 years. I was still regularly on a live server. Before I run a script, I'll just go into Nano and check what it is it's doing. So I'm sure it's doing exactly the things I think it's doing and only those things. So I can be crystal clear that what is going to happen when I run this script. And if you want to go the whole hog, you can also have dry runs. So you can set your scripts up so that they won't do anything, but they'll tell you what they would have done. So rather than deploying a new version of the game code, maybe your script just connects to all the data centers, make sure they seem to be there and everything seems fine, and says, well, this would have worked, we reckon, but we didn't do anything. Now, no system is perfect. You know, we had to do a rollback this year, despite having a system process we've built up over years. Errors are going to happen. It's a fact of life. But all of this process, the testing, the review, QA, a sensible staging environment, the right deployment process, will mitigate that risk down to the absolute minimum. And at that point, all you have to worry about is what your players think about your update. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
As your cadence is increasing maybe you might be able to do this like every process every year, make it or has that changed at all?
Yeah, so I mean, we're about to, less than a week, we're launching the mobile version of old school RuneScape, so playing the same game but on your phone. And because we now have to go through the approval process for Android and iOS, we just have a much bigger lead time. So everyone in the company needs to understand the process for getting a feature from being developed into live is a lot longer. We need more time for QA. We need to let Apple and Google do their approval process. So that has a change to the process, just that things take there's a longer pipeline. People have got to cope with that. And it also affects how quickly we can do updates if there's a bug. Yes, that's one change that's happened quite recently. I mean, RuneScape has been RuneScape for a long time, so the process is fairly static, but that's been the biggest change recently. Yeah. Yes?
Do you monitor what your competitors are doing in terms of their updates?
What do you mean in terms of how they're doing it, or
When they're doing it?
when they're doing it?
I mean, is there a strategy to line your updates? You want better.
Oh, I see. Well, because we're updating every week, we're not really in the same sort of situation as, say, World of Warcraft doing a big update, every sort of however often, because we're doing something every week. Players know that we do a roll, it's a RuneScape free update on a Monday and an Ultra update on a Thursday, and that's every week. So we just keep going with things as we are.
Does that have an effect on your load? For instance, do you find your load increases when you've just done it?
Yes. So when we push out new versions of the client, so you connect to an asset server which is streaming all of the data you need, and that obviously gets a lot of load when there's been an update, because everybody needs a new version of something. But we can scale that sideways. We can have as many asset servers as we need, so we can cope with that load. Yes?
Do you get a sense of how understanding the community were about the rollback you had to do, and were they kind of angry?
I mean, I think we handled it in a pretty professional way. We said very quickly, you know, we realised this has gone wrong. We're going to have to do a rollback. You know, we were very open and transparent. Yes, there's been a bug. It will mean a rollback. We're getting on with it as quickly as we can. Because it's such a rare event, I think they were understanding that, you know, we're not doing this, you know, twice a week and screwing everything up. But obviously, there's always some frustration whenever anything like this happens. But I think, yeah, we dealt with it quickly. We were open about it, and I think that was the way to handle the community on that.
Does that mean now ill-gotten gains have to go back? Or
Sorry?
the ill-gotten gains?
Well, because we'd rolled the save games back, it was as if those things had never happened. So all that extra cash just disappeared. Yeah. Hello.
It's better to have a constant schedule for updates, or would it be like, oh, if we found this bug, we should update it immediately, or we should update like a week afterwards?
Depends on how severe the bug is. So there are times when we have to go, oh my goodness, yes, let's do this now. But if it is frustrating but not vital, we will wait for the next week. Sometimes the thing to do is to hotfix some of the scripts to disable something. So, for example, the in-game titles of RuneScape right now aren't on because of a bug which we're about to fix. So all we did was just put a hotfix in the login script to just remove everybody's title for the time being. They'll come back later. And then in the meantime, we then push on with the engine side fix to get that working again, and then we can turn them all back on again. Yeah, so the fact we can hotfix stuff is very useful. Yeah. Yes?
How many people usually work on the average rollback?
So, I mean, the old school guys were kind of all hands on deck to find the actual script bug, and then the QA guys tested it, and they're a team of, I mean, there probably would have been, well, up to about 10 people probably looking at that total. The platform team, I mean, it was really me and the principal developer who's been there for about 14 years and knows everything inside out. We were doing our end of it, and the sysadmin guys, a couple of guys on their end, were finding the backups. So probably, you know, a dozen people, maybe slightly more, were kind of involved. It's a process we do very rarely, but the steps are fairly well defined, so it was sort of well contained in that sense. And behind, yes.
Is there any particular challenges to doing, like, say, old school versus RuneScape 3 in terms of updates, or like running two like similar but separate games side by side?
Problems? How do you mean?
Like, if there's like one, like, I guess is one game harder to do, I suppose.
Obviously, I mean, it's all. I mean, we've all got to the point where the senior guys in the content side do the updates themselves. They can push a button on a system and that pushes it out. So they are well automated to the kind of the sensible degree I was talking about. And so actually on the engine side, and unless we're doing, well, we build the update for an engine, but those guys actually launch it. So it's not particularly complicated. There's a lot of steps to go through to make sure it's going to work, but the actual pushing the button is pretty straightforward, and they're both kind of equally easy. Yeah.
How do you feel about dealing with like botting and like people trying to automate?
Yes, that's always a problem. So, what can I say? We don't want to give away too much about what we do about botting. Yeah, we have entire teams of people looking at this. We have some automated systems that can deal with botting issues, ways of recognising it. It is a problem. People do want to just, I said, it would take you, whatever it was, 4 months to get 2 billion in gold. People would much like to rather just shortcut that and have something do it for them. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that the more effort we put into it, the more we win that battle. So you've got, on the one hand, you've got a lot of people willing to put in a lot of time and effort to do some botting. We've got, some highly professional, well-paid data scientists who are looking at, how they can stop it. And so it's a battle we win slightly more over time, but it is still an issue.
The retro one, you used a bot for mining. You have this random character, and it would come up with it'd take all your stuff.
Well, so we used to have random events, which would just, if we thought you were sort of AFKing, if you just, automating something, then some little genie or something would pop up and say, hey, I'm going to do a thing. And if you didn't interact with it, it would then do something weird to you. Those turned out to not be very effective in the long run because people could write scripts to just deal with those. So we took them out. But yeah, we did used to do that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's going to depend on the scale of the update. So when we release, a whole an awful lot of testing because there's so much. Smaller things will be quite quick, but if we're doing an engine build, we might do that build on a Thursday and get tested throughout the next week, and could then go out, the week after or maybe even 2 weeks after. But now we've got mobile coming along, that stretches that even longer. But there are plenty of content updates those guys can do without us being involved at all from an engine side. They're just changing the content. And quite what their lead time is, I'm actually not sure. So there we are. One more question. If we yes, hello. I'll try and hear you. Yeah.
Is this sort of something where the higher ups have gone a bit of a start now, like it's encouraging private stuff, or is it sort of your position such
I mean, you know, they know that we're the ones with the expertise to fix it, and they have enough sense to just let us get on with it while it's going on. You know, I mean, and these things aren't happening. You know, mistakes will happen, and they understand that. If someone was doing it twice a month, people might ask questions, but that's not happening. We have a process; it's robust. You know, we have people who know what they're doing. I mean, you know, yeah, people like to apportion blame, but that's not really. You know, we understand that's not really how these things work. So, yeah. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.